Hi, friends. Happy Friday. We made it. We made it to another Friday. And today I want to wrap up this week's You Were Made for More conversations with something I think a lot of us need to hear, maybe me included. And here it is. You don't need permission to become more of who God created you to be. And I wonder how many of us have spent years, maybe even decades, waiting for it, waiting for somebody to tell us, yes, you can do that. Yes, you're qualified. Yes, you're ready. Yes, that's a good idea. Yes, you can change your mind. Yes, you can want something different now. Yes, you can become someone different than who you've always been. We want somebody to hand us a little permission slip that says, Susan is hereby authorized to become the woman God created her to be, signed, preferably by God Himself, and maybe notarized just to be safe. But, friend, what if we're waiting for permission um, we were never supposed to need? We've covered a lot this week. And I think these prior conversations we've had, they all bring us right here. Because sometimes we know something is changing. We know we've grown. We know something doesn't fit anymore. We know there's something stirring inside of us. And yet we're still walking around the room to see if anybody else is okay with it. And can I tell you something? Everybody may not be okay with it. So there's your uplifting Friday message, okay? But seriously, when you start changing, it can make other people uncomfortable. Not necessarily because they're like bad people. Sometimes it's simply because they knew how to relate to the old version of you. They knew what you would say yes to. They knew what you would tolerate. They knew what role you played. They knew what you would do. They knew what you wouldn't do. And one day you start saying things like, "Actually, that doesn't work for me anymore." Or, "I think I want something different." Or, "I can't keep doing this." Or, embrace yourselves, no. One syllable, two letters, and somehow one of the hardest complete sentences in the English language. But becoming who God created you to be will sometimes require disappointing the expectations other people had for you who you were supposed to remain. And that's hard, especially for those of us who care deeply, deeply about people. We don't want to hurt anyone. We don't want to disappoint anyone. We don't want anyone thinking we've changed, although hopefully we have changed. Like, isn't that the point? We're supposed to grow. We're supposed to learn, to mature. We're supposed to become. Romans 12:2 tells us, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformed, not frozen in place, not permanently assigned to the version of ourselves we were 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, but transformed. And I think sometimes we confuse consistency with staying the same. And they're not. They're not the same. Your values can remain. Your faith can deepen. Your character, it can strengthen. Your love for people can grow, while the way you live, lead, work, serve, dream, and show up in the world changes. That's not necessarily abandoning who you were. Sometimes it's evidence that you're becoming who you were always created to be. And that's why I continue to come back to my anchor verse, Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, who God prepared in advance for us to do. You know, his workmanship, his masterpiece, you are still being shaped, still being refined, still being woven. God didn't finish working in you when you turned 25 or 30, 40, 50, 60, or even 70. Thank goodness. Because some of us are sitting here thinking, Lord, I certainly hope there's still time because we've got some work to do. And there is. There is still more of you to discover, more faith to grow into, more courage, more wisdom, more love, more purpose, more of the woman God created you to be. And remember what we've said all week. More does not mean more pressure. It doesn't mean cramming more onto your calendar. It doesn't mean proving yourself. It doesn't mean chasing some bigger, shinier life. Sometimes more actually looks like less. Less people pleasing, less pretending, less carrying things God never asked you to carry, less shrinking, less explaining yourself, less waiting for everyone else to approve. And maybe that's what somebody needs to hear today. You don't have to become somebody else. You get to become more fully you, the woman God created, the woman he's still shaping, the woman who's allowed to grow beyond an old season, the woman who's allowed to change her mind, the woman who's allowed to set a boundary, the woman who's allowed to pursue something new, the woman who's allowed to admit, I want more for my life. Not because what you have isn't enough, not because you're ungrateful, but because you recognize that God may not be finished writing this part of your story yet. So, friends, here's what I want you to think about this weekend. Where are you still waiting for permission? And permission to begin, permission to stop, to change, to rest, to dream again, to become, and then ask yourself, whose permission am I waiting for? Because if God is leading you, if you've prayed, if you've sought wisdom, if you've listened, if you know there's something he's asking you to step toward, maybe you don't need another person's approval. Maybe you need courage. And courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage looks like one quiet decision. I am not going to keep shrinking. I'm not going to keep talking myself out of this. I'm going to trust God with my next step. Friend, you were made for more. Not more pressure, more purpose. Not more proving, more becoming. Not more of who everybody else thinks you should be, more of who God created you to be. And you don't need permission to become her. I hope you'll carry that with you this weekend. And Monday, we're starting a brand new conversation that I have a feeling is going to hit home for a lot of us. Because how many times have we said, I just don't have time right now? Yep, we're going there. Friends, I'll see you Monday. Until then, faith, life, leadership. 3 threads, 1 tapestry, 1 life.